The time is now 5:59. Meeting will start in 1 minute. The time is now 6 o'clock. Chairperson Raymond, would you please bring the meeting to order?
This meeting will come to order. Would you please do the roll call?
Can you put on your microphone real quick? Would you mind repeating it?
Okay, this meeting will come to order now. And City Clerk, would you please do the roll call?
Roll call is as follows. Chairperson Raymond,
Here.
Vice Chair Kirby,
Here.
Board Member Waller,
Here.
Board Member Taylor,
Here.
Board Member Misanaga,
Here.
all present for the board.
Okay, now the reading of the land acknowledgement. The City of Rohnert Park acknowledges indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of the land. Let it be known that the City of Rohnert Park is located within the traditional homelands of the Federated Indians of Greaton Rancheria and comprised of Coast Miwok and Southern Pomo peoples. Please all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. Was the agenda posted in all three public places, Community Center, Public Safety Building, and City Hall?
That's confirmed.
Okay, and now we have the ceremony for installation of the new officers, Rent Appeal Board members. Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped one. This is a ceremony for we have new people on and we need to install them. So.
And we have our Assistant City Clerk, Elizabeth Machinato, here, available to swear everyone in.
Hello. First, I just want to say thank you for your service. We have a small token of appreciation for you guys. So I am going to read the oath, and if you'd like to stand.
This is for the new people, yeah.
Yes, it'll also be for Board Member Taylor.
Okay.
And then I'll read the oath. I'll say I. I'll pause and you can say your name. Then I'll read the rest of it and then at the end you can affirm. Okay. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. Thank you. So I have the oaths for you to sign.
Thank you.
oath, and then I'll give you guys some.
Well, as chairperson, I first of all wish to congratulate our new members and thank you for coming on board. Now we have the election of officers for the year 2025. And please, one more thing. Have been very happy to serve as chairperson, and I thank you for electing me. And also, I'm just delighted to be on this board and to serve my city. So, do we have a nomination for a chair?
Through the chair, if I may, I have a very, very short presentation just to remind everybody of how we usually do this. Would you mind if I share that?
Please do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know we don't, we end up meeting a couple times a year oftentimes, so a little refresher tends to help with this. So just a little reminder of how this works. Back at the November 7th, 2019 meeting, which these two members sitting next to me were commissioners at the time, the board provided direction that they want to set a rotational process similar to the city council's for officer elections. So for anybody not familiar with the city council's process, they take turns being mayor and vice mayor. And they kind of, go down the line oftentimes. And frequently, the way it tends to work is the person who's a vice mayor becomes the mayor the next year. So you're kind of a mayor in waiting. We've tended to do a similar thing here on the board, although that's not a rule, it's just the practice. Pat Raymond was elected and served as chair throughout 2024, and Jan Kirby was elected and served as vice chair throughout 2024. So since this is the first meeting of 2025, the board will need to elect a chair and vice chair for the remainder of this year. This is just a nice friendly reminder of who all of you are and when your first appointment was, most recent appointment. Congratulations for our 3 that were just appointed or reappointed tonight, and then the term expirations. So our recommendation is to vote for a chair and vice chair. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, do I have a nomination for chairperson?
I'd like to nominate Vice Chair Kirby.
Okay, and then do we have a second? I second. Is there any discussion? So if you would please take the roll.
Roll call vote is as follows. Board Member Taylor,
Aye.
Board Member Waller,
Aye.
Chair Raymond,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kirby, Board Member Misinaga.
Aye.
The motion passes with 5 ayes, 0 noes, and 0 excused absent.
Thank you. Jan, it's all yours.
Oh, actually, through the chair.
We have to vote for vice chair.
Yeah, but you hold the elections because she's now chair. Doesn't she hold the elections for that?
It's up to you, but we tend to do both and then do
Yes.
the rearranging of the chairs at one
And
time.
I should go ahead? Okay. Do we have a nomination for vice chair?
I would like to nominate Carla Taylor for vice chair, 2025.
And a second?
I second.
Okay. Any discussion? So if you would please go ahead and do the roll call.
Roll call is as follows. Board Member Waller? Aye.
Aye.
Board Member Kirby?
Aye.
Board Member Misinaga?
Aye.
Board Member Taylor?
Aye.
And Board Member Raymond.
Aye.
And the vote passes with 4 ayes, 0 noes, and 0 excused absent.
Congratulations to our new chair.
Congratulations. Chair Kirby, would you please bring the meeting back to order?
Public comment. Items not on the agenda. Do we have any persons who'd like to speak to the board regarding an item not on the agenda? May do so at this time. Okay. Consent calendar, approval of minutes. We need to approve the draft minutes of the Mobile Home Parks Rent Appeals Board meeting of October 3rd, 2024. Do we have copies of those minutes?
We do.
Okay. Am I the only one with the copy?
I don't have a copy of it.
We can maybe put that to the side until everyone has a copy, and then we can look at them together and decide if we want to approve those minutes.
And through the chair, if I may, we are going to be meeting next month for the budget meeting. Another option would be to continue this item, and then this would come back for consideration and approval at next month's meeting.
Okay, board members, how do you feel about that? Just getting a copy of those minutes, taking them home, being able to look them over until the next meeting?
I think that
can be
would be
voted on?
I think that would be an excellent idea.
I would second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we've decided to postpone that until the May meeting. Okay, we'll move on to agenda items. Rent Appeals Board, new member orientation, and update on staff activities. This is a presentation only. Jenna, I think that's you.
It's me, and Emily will be giving a portion of it too, which I'm super excited about because she's been doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes to support the work of the Rent Appeals Board and support implementation of the mobile home ordinance. But thank you, Chair. So some of you may remember 4 years ago, we did a version of this when we had a number of new commissioners, and now we've got a few new commissioners. So a good opportunity to do both an orientation for our new commissioners, a refresher course for folks who it's been a little while, and also to just share some of the activities that staff have been up to. So I'm going to do the portion of this talking about just what the board does, what the history is. For those of you who have your binders in front of you, some of this kind of follows along with your binder. And if it doesn't, if you don't have it in front of you, it's because you have it memorized. You already know all this stuff. But this will be, a refresher for some folks. But I will say, I think through the chair, I'm okay keeping this a little informal if folks want to ask questions during. Are you comfortable with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Since this is educational, asking people to hold the questions to the end might mean we forget. So, so feel free to interrupt and kind of raise your hand, and through the chair, we'll recognize you to answer questions. So I'll give an update about what we're going to be talking about, which is what the first slide is. So the purpose of tonight's discussion is to acquaint or reacquaint board members with mobile home ordinance and related rules, discuss roles and responsibilities, give a little overview about the Brown Act, and then discuss any board activities and upcoming meetings. So your board binder, when you first started, a couple years ago, we updated these. We gave everybody a commissioner binder that has these 6 tabs in them. It has an ordinance, rules and regulations, bylaws, Rosenberg's rules, a place for agendas, so you could put your agendas in there if you want to save them, and then a tab for budgets. This is always a helpful place to start, just to remind ourselves of the mobile home parks that are in the city. So there are 5 mobile home parks within the city of Rohnert Park. These are the 5 that are listed up on the screen here. It's a total of 1,317 spaces in these 5 parks. And the total that were on rent control in 2024 was 1,194. So the vast majority of those, for folks who can't do that math, the vast majority of the spaces in these parks are on rent control and subject to the mobile home ordinance. The mobile home ordinance was approved by the voters of the city of Rohnert Park in 1987 and was established for the reasons up on the board here, that prevent exploitation due to housing shortage, prevent unreasonable rent increases, provide park owners a reasonable rate of return, and protect affordable housing. And this is oftentimes what folks refer to as naturally occurring affordable housing, because it's more affordable by design with the, the type of housing that it is and the size. The mobile home ordinance also created this board, the Rent Appeals Board, which is appointed by the city council. So each one of you is appointed by a different member of our city council. You must be a resident of Rohnert Park. You do serve for 4-year terms, but there are no limits on the number of terms. And it requires in the mobile home ordinance that rules are established, which we'll talk about in a minute. It also sets requirements for owners of the park. It sets the maximum allowable rents. So the baseline was as of December 1st, 1985. That's adjusted by the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, every year. CPI is an indicator of inflation year over year. It does not apply to long-term leases or new units. So if there's any new units added to these parks, it would not apply to those. It does not also apply to spaces that are on long-term leases, which you may have noticed on an earlier slide where I showed all 5 parks. Majority of the spaces are on monthly, month-to-month agreements, not on these long-term leases.
Jenna, I have a question. Where it says it doesn't apply to long-term leases and new units, what is considered a new unit? Is that a new mobile home on an existing space, or is that a new space where a new home is going?
Thank you. As soon as you started asking that, I thought, oh, that's just a good question. I'm pretty sure that's new spaces, and that thank you for highlighting that. We should update this in our PowerPoint. We'll double check in the code though that is the case. But the reality is, mobile homes, although some people say, are they really mobile because they don't move around a lot, right? They're not on wheels. They are technically mobile, and sometimes people do exchange one that's there for a new one. And that, because the rent that you're paying is usually on the space, it would apply to new spaces.
Thank you.
Yes, Carla.
Yes, staff. Thank you guys so much for everything you do. Clotilde, Emily, Jenna. I'm kidding. I had to get her. It's been a minute that we've seen each other. I had a question. Going back to previous meeting, I'm trying to understand and get clarity. In 2025, is it true that not the owners, but the managers are not allowed to have any more long-term leases? Was that supposed to end in 2025? For some reason, that is in my brain somewhere.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. The city has not amended this code, so they can offer long-term leases. However, they need to also offer monthly agreements, which would be subject to rent control per the code.
Thank you, staff.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Taylor. The mobile home ordinance also requires annual registration of spaces, which sometimes I will refer to, or Emily may refer to, as our annual monitoring. What it means is that they need to give us an account, the park owners and representatives need to give us a detailed account of every one of the spaces in that park and tell us how much they're charging for rent so we can confirm that they are in compliance with the ordinance. And in the ordinance, we call that registration or re-registration each year. The mobile home ordinance also establishes permissible rent adjustments, which we'll talk about in a minute as well, how much you can increase, not just through the annual general adjustment, but if there are unique circumstances that would require an increase. For example, a capital improvement pass-through in a project, in a park, then it establishes what the process is for that. The rules and regulations further unpacks the mobile home ordinance. The mobile home ordinance has a lot of good detail in it, but it says you're going to establish rules and regulations, the Rent Appeals Board will, which dictate how the business of the RAB is done. And these are the chapters that are in the rules and regulations, and that's one of the documents in your binder. Adjustments to the rent. So the annual general adjustment, or AGA, only applies to rent-controlled spaces, like we already noticed. That happens on February 1st or the annual anniversary of each park thereafter. We have some parks that are February 1st, March 1st, and April 1st, so they're all kind of in a row. It's based on the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, that's set in August, and then you establish that permitted rent increase in October. And really, I say established, but it really is announced, because the formula for determining that amount is hard-coded into the code, into the ordinance. So what staff does is we pull the CPI numbers, those come out mid-September. We pull them for August of the year that we're in, compare it to the prior year, and then apply a formula to see what the difference was between those 2 years, and that's how we come up with the annual general adjustment or maximum rent increase for the upcoming year. Our process is to request how many spaces are on rent control in August of all the park owners and representatives. We bring the annual general adjustment to the board in the October meeting. And then afterwards, and you also set the registration fees in the October meeting. Afterwards, we get those invoices out to the owners. We let them know what the annual general adjustment was so that they can prepare to send out those rent increase notices to their residents. And then the registration fees are due to the city on behalf of each park. The park owner pays it in one check on February 1st of each year. And then throughout the year, they recoup those costs in the monthly amounts that you see on your bills, you know, as you pay your rent each month for folks who live in those parks. And the registration fees, which are paid for ultimately by people living in those rent-controlled spaces, is what funds the board's budget and all the activities that we do. So this is the annual general adjustment that was applied in October of this last year, just for a little refresher and also a little preview of what's to come this upcoming October. So like I mentioned, this is applied on or after February 1st. It's based on when the park anniversary is. It's based on CPI in August, already said that. And the calculation there at the bottom, I just want to point that out. So and we have an Excel spreadsheet that does the math for us, we double check it, but basically you take that difference, that 308,640 next to August 24, minus the previous, you'll come up with that net change index of 7.089. We figure out what the percentage change was down to the third percentile or third decimal. We round it to the nearest 1/10 of 1%. And then we take off 0.5%. And so that 1.9 at the very end is the actual annual general adjustment. And that whole calculation I just said out loud is what's hard-coded in the mobile home ordinance. We follow it every year. One very important thing, and folks who have been living in mobile home parks for the last few years during COVID have seen, there have been examples of time where inflation has increased over, 5, 6, 7, even up to 8.5%. In one of the years, something else that's built into the ordinance is a cap. So the maximum that it can ever increase, regardless of what inflation ends up being, is 4%. We had 2 years, Jan and Carla, I feel like it was 21 and 22, 2020, 21, something like that. 2 years in a row where we hit the 4%. Both of those years, it exceeded that. One of the years, I think it was about 8.5% difference. It was pretty significant. But because that is hard-coded in there, it capped at 4%.
You might mention, too, that the increase cannot be a negative.
Oh, that's a good point. Thank you. It's been a long time since that ever happened, Pat. It was before my time. But you're right. That did happen at one point. Yeah, I think it's been close to 10 years now, but there have been times where the inflation was so minor that when you deducted the 0.5%, which is that last step to figure out the actual annual adjustment, it puts you in the negative. And you're right, thank you. You can never, you can't tell park owners that they have to reduce the rent. It would just stay zero in that case.
I was just about to ask that. I'm like, okay, if that's the case, then what is it? So then it's just zero.
Yeah.
Love that.
It would be, so to speak, a taking away if you did the minus.
Yeah, it would go against part of the intention of the ordinance, which is a guaranteed a fair return for the park owners. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are two types of petitions that may come through the Rent Appeals Board's business. The first is a landlord petition, and the second is a homeowner or resident petition. And landlord petition, that really means park owner petition. Like I mentioned before, and I think this factors in with what Commissioner Raymond was suggesting, is there is a guarantee or a promise that the landlord is entitled to a fair return. So, you know, this rent stabilization that's in place is not at the, you know, expense of having a fair return. It's meant to be a happy balance where folks have some guarantee and protections around rent increases. They're not going to see super steep or, you know, landlords that are price gouging. But also the owner understands and can expect to get a fair return. So net operating income is one of the tools we use to determine, are they getting a fair return? So rent increase could be based on that. If a landlord feels that the amount that they're able to increase based on the annual general adjustment is not resulting in a fair return, they could submit a petition, and they would have to provide documentation to demonstrate that, and it would go through a hearing process, which I'll talk about in a minute. But this is one of the examples of a landlord petition that could come in. We haven't seen these as often. The more common one is the second one that's up here, which are capital improvement pass-throughs. So this captures the cost of a one-time improvement. It could be repaving in a mobile home park, could be, you know, adding amenities or fixing amenities. And this also would come in as a landlord petition to pass this on to the folks living in those rent-controlled spaces through a capital improvement pass-through.
I have a question, staff.
Go ahead.
I was wondering, when you have a capital improvement pass-through, does it come through the city of Rohnert Park first?
So the process for that is it goes to a hearing examiner, and I actually have a slide and 2 slides where I'm going to talk through that. So if we can hang on for a minute, I'll talk through what that process is.
Thank you, staff.
I have a question on the net operating income. Is this situation what's going on in the park in Petaluma in Youngstown, where the owner of the park wants to raise the rate so high that people can't live there?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, you know, the last few years, that question highlights that the last few years in the cities around us especially, we've seen this be a really hot button issue. In Rohnert Park, we haven't seen this as much, mostly because this has been in place for so many years. You know, Rohnert Park hasn't had to hustle to put protections in place like some of the other cities have in the last few years. I have not sat in any of those hearing meetings, so I'm reading the same newspaper articles you are, but I think that would be the argument of the landlord, is that they feel that they are not getting a fair return on the amount that the new ordinance allows them to increase the rent.
Staff, I have a question also. Again, is it possible to be notified when a hearing is going on, so for learning purposes, so that we could actually see in real time? I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if that's a thing, or educate me.
Yeah, that's a great question. So if it's in a different city, it's not something that Rohnert Park City staff would be involved with. But if folks are interested in following along with those, you can certainly reach out to our counterparts in Petaluma, and I don't know if Santa Rosa has any. Petaluma has a few, you know, that are making their way through some sort of process, hearing process, or there was another word for it too that I'm blanking on that they're in right now. But we could certainly connect you with our counterparts if you're interested in learning more about that. They may also have information on their website about how to participate. I'm not totally sure all of those are open meetings, however, because sometimes it's not part of a city council or formal board or commission. It's a, you know, hearing with a hearing examiner.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you, staff.
Any other questions, or shall I continue? I think the bottom bullet point here is a really important one to highlight. The landlords or park owners are responsible for the costs associated with their petition. So at the time that they submit a petition, they have to provide a deposit to staff, and staff will bill our time, city attorney's time, hearing examiner's time, anyone that's involved in reviewing that material, putting together documentation, et cetera. We will bill it against that deposit. If we run out of money on the deposit, we stop work until they re-up the deposit. The other type of petition are homeowner or resident petitions. Some older documents refer to this as tenant petitions, but we tend to prefer resident petitions because many folks living in mobile home parks are owners of the home that they're in, although they may also be tenants of the space, right? But residents may file petitions when owners don't follow the ordinance. For example, if they don't follow registration requirements, they're not posting. Also petition for improper rent increases. So if you're, receiving an improper rent increase due, for utilities, increase above the permitted annual increase, let's say the maximum was 1.2 and your increase was 3, that would be a reason for a resident petition. Resident petitions are covered by the budget of this board, and the intention for that is because the residents are the ones paying into, fund the budget of this board. So they pay, and I should have this on the top of my head, and I'm looking at Jan, I feel like it's $50, on the front end. Does that sound right? To file a resident petition, and then the rest of it is covered by the board.
Jenna, I have a question on the utilities. I think some parks get their separate bills for PG&E, water, sewer, etc. My particular park does not. It's included on our space rent bill. So we don't really know we have no way of knowing whether those utilities are billed correctly or not. We have no way of knowing. We just get numbers on our space rent telling us how many kilowatts or whatever we've used, but we don't know what they say is a charge per kilowatt. We have nothing to compare that to see if it's accurate. Mm-hmm. Where do you find that? I tried to do that once, and it just, boy, did it turn into a can of worms.
Yeah, it's a good question, and not one that I'm going to have a really good answer for. I think park owners are responsible for tracking that information, similar to someone, who might be living in a home or condo in the community. They depend on PG&E to track that information. And I don't have a way, if I walk outside of my house, to figure it out for myself. Was I charged the right amount? So, I think in this case, and this is just me sort of speaking from my own thoughts, if there is something that looks extraordinarily like not in line, it would be something worth raising with your landlord. The types of things that I think are a bit more clear-cut in a petition situation is if they're charging you for utilities that are not part of your agreement. So they start charging you for, services, amenities, or utilities that was not something you agreed upon. That would make a lot of sense, to include in the petition. But trying to figure out what the exact baseline is for utilities is a much trickier thing to do, and I'm not sure that there is a way to be able to double check it.
Staff, I'd like to comment.
Through the chair, and it looks like we also have a question with Pat.
Yeah, I wanted to feed something to Jan, because we now are with PG&E directly, but in the past we've had some big mistakes made on reading the meters. And what it lays, or what actually has to happen is that the person who owns the home has to keep an eye on things. Mm-hmm. And if something is really out of sorts, and you do that by keeping month-to-month rent bills and comparing, then you can go to the landlord and they will reread the meter and adjust it.
Also, Jan, if I can add, when I realized that there might be an issue, because I had the same question about how do they do this collectively? I said, because I have a surveillance system, so if somebody comes in that area, I know if someone has come to check the meter. And I found out nobody was checking the meter. And so I started taking pictures every day for a month. And so if the guy came out, if I saw a guy come out, I made sure I took a picture and had the same numbers he had. So when the bill came in, I have all of my receipts from when I moved in, which was 2018. So I looked at that because my bill went up extremely high and I was like, what? And I wanted evidence, some proof of, and why, and who is coming by, and if we are or are not part of PG&E. I was having that same issue. And
I have my bills going back to 2005.
oh, there you go. There you go.
No comparison.
So when I actually addressed management, they did correct it because there was an error. But if I had not been diligent, then I wouldn't have noticed.
Well, it sounds like we have a lot of wisdom and good answers in the room. So continuing on from that, this is the hearing examiner process. This is the same process for regardless of what type of petition it is. So when a petition comes in, of course, we'll always keep the Rent Appeals Board in the know, so you're aware of where things are at. But it's going to come in first as an application from either the park owner representative or the resident. Staff is going to review it, ensure that it's complete. Sometimes that's a process in and of itself. And then once we have a complete application with all backup documentation, because backup documentation or evidence is really important for the hearing examiner to make a decision. Then the hearing examiner, which is a third-party person who's qualified to do this, oftentimes an attorney, very familiar with mobile home law, will conduct the hearing with the applicable parties and then make a ruling. At that point, that ruling is final unless appealed. So if someone comes in and let's say a resident says, I have been overcharged $50 a month, here's my evidence, and the hearing examiner agrees and says, yep, it looks like you were. Now the ruling is, landlord, you need to pay them back this much based on all this information. The landlord could then appeal it, right? And say, I disagree with the decision of the hearing examiner, at which time the Rent Appeals Board would hear the appeal. You are the entity, the board that gets appealed to, and then you make a decision, and that decision is final. And, bear in mind, if it's a landlord petition, kind of similar, a different example, but similar process, so the landlord submits an application. They say, I think, I want to be able to recoup on this large capital improvement project that we did in the park. We repaved all the streets. It cost this much money. This is my, request. The hearing examiner makes, reviews all the material, may request additional material, makes a final ruling. And if that ruling is not agreed to, if the tenants, for example, residents don't agree with it, they may appeal it to the Rent Appeals Board, and then your decision is final.
Jenna, I'd like to add something that's really important that I think Pat and I are probably most proud of, is that when we rewrote some of the capital improvement pass-through procedures, I think the one that we were most happy with, one of them, is that before they can start the capital improvement pass-through, the owner or the park manager or their representative has got to meet with the residents prior to doing anything. That doesn't mean that you can say, no, I don't want you doing it, but they have got to tell you. Prior to that change in the rules, they could just go in and repave all of your entire streets and say, and oh, by the way, collectively, you residents owe us $1.217 million. And they could collect it, spread over however many years the hearing examiner thought was appropriate. They were allowed to do that. So it caught a lot of residents unaware because their now space rent invoice went up by however number of dollars that was. And for people on a fixed income, whatever, that was devastating for them. So now they have got to meet with the residents and let them know, this is what we'd like to do, this is how much we think it's going to cost, this is what it would mean for the residents prior to starting the project.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And that was part of, so the rules and regulations, which are in your binder, it's this thing right here. This was most recently updated, you'll see at the very end, in 2019. Here, I'll turn it so everyone can see. And that was one of the several amendments that Chair Kirby's referring to that was done in 2019, that both Chair Kirby and Board Commissioner Raymond were a part of at the time, part of the Rent Appeals Board, and those changes. And what Chair Kirby's saying is exactly right. So although the capital improvement pass-through can't come in as an application until the work's been done, there's a requirement that they need to have done a meeting, provided a meeting to all residents of that mobile home park to come and hear about the proposed project before construction begins. So one of the things staff will need to request if and when we get one of these, in order for an application to be complete, we want evidence that such a meeting occurred before the work began. Bylaws. So bylaws are also part of your binder in front of you, and this sets rules of conduct for the board. So this is also something that we can amend and do amend from time to time. It includes stuff like the regular meeting time is at 6 p.m., how to call a special meeting, sets the agenda, requires posting of the agenda, meeting procedures. It puts in place that Rosenberg's Rule of Order governs the meetings, which is another document that you've got in your binder there. And Rosenberg's Rules of Order includes a few things. It's a good guideline to get a sense of how formal meetings like this are, how they function. So a quorum is at least 3 members. So we cannot have a meeting if we don't have at least 3 of you, because you can't make a decision without at least 3. Chair leads the meetings. So, you know, these meetings can tend to be a little less formal than some of the most formal ones, you know, and our chairs tend to be good sports. But officially, you know, if somebody wanted to, you know, make a motion or ask a question, they would say through the chair, and the chair would grant you, you know, the opportunity to ask that question. The Rosenberg's Rules of Orders also sets the format for agenda item discussion and explains how to make motions, which you all got to practice earlier tonight. And you all did a great job, by the way, making a motion, seconding the motion, and then doing the roll call. The Brown Act, which we talk about a lot in California because it's a specific law in California, this is the Sunshine Law for local governments. So this applies to all legislative bodies, including boards, commissions, city council, planning commission, and it's basically, you know, intended to ensure that the public has an opportunity to participate in decisions that are going to be affecting their community. They have ample notice that such meetings are going to happen, and they get to see the decision-making happening while it's happening. There's no closed-door, secret conversations happening unless it's a closed session situation, which is probably not something that comes up as often with the Rent Appeals Board, but with City Council, it does sometimes when there's litigation, staff evaluations, those types of things. But otherwise, all meetings need to be open to the public. There's no meeting of quorum outside of the public meeting. no serial meetings, and no meetings through staff. So I'll tell you what all of those mean. I think, some of you have asked me, I really like my fellow commissioners. Can we hang out outside of, the Rent Appeals Board? And the answer is absolutely, you can hang out. The main thing to be aware of is that you're not talking business, right? You can talk about liking being on the board, that's not business, but as soon as you're like, what do you think that the annual general adjustment is gonna be next year? I know everyone talks about that, right? Do you think so-and-so is gonna do a capital improvement pass through? I will say, the temptation to have those types of conversations outside of public meetings happens more often when there's hot button issues happening. So when it's just regular business like this, it's not going to be as tempting. But when there's stuff that's riling up the communities and riling up the board, that's when it's going to be more tempting, and we may have to do extra reminders. So you all can definitely hang out outside of these meetings. Just be careful not to talk about business that is, Rent Appeals Board business. And City Council has to do that as well. Now, quorum is 3 people. So if just 2 of you talk to each other ahead of a meeting and you wanted to talk about something that was on the agenda, let's say Carla called Pat and said, did you see those minutes? That's not a Brown Act violation. I know, very exciting, riveting. But, so if you did that and the 2 of you talked about the minutes and that's where it ended and nobody talked to anyone else, that would be okay under the Brown Act. Maybe not a good idea because of the potential of things getting out, but still, it's okay. As soon as Pat picks up the phone and calls Anna and says, did you see the minutes? Well, even though the 3 of them didn't talk at the same time, sorry for picking on you, but that's something that's called a daisy chain, where you start to string it together and you just had an informal meeting of 3 people, even though all 3 didn't talk at the same time. So that's a serial meeting or daisy chain. The other thing we have to be careful of, and staff is very educated on this, so we know not to do this, but we have to be careful not to have meetings through staff. So if Jan comes and talks to me and then I say, hey, Tony, Jan told me blah, 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 then we just might have shared some information that's in violation of Brown Act. So bottom line with this is to be really careful, to not talk business outside of Rent Appeals Board meetings. And that also means before, after, and during recess. Those have been some times in recent memory for me that other commissions have sometimes struggled. It might be not 6 o'clock yet, and people are always like, oh my gosh, did you see this item on the agenda? Well, we haven't tapped the gavel yet. The meeting has not started. The public process has not started. We are not talking business. Now, we as staff will give gentle reminders. Oh, no business yet, or if there's a recess called, you don't talk business on the recess, right? But that's where I've seen, some of the slip-ups sometimes happen. Some additional things about Brown Act: agendas must be posted. We want the public to have ample time to review the agendas, decide if they want to participate. So regular meetings need to be at least 72 hours prior. We tend to post, a week or the Friday before our meetings, just to give you all the opportunity, especially over the weekend, to take a look at it. Technically, 72 hours means that we could post on Monday before the Thursday meeting, but we like to be nicer than that and give you plenty of time to review agendas. If there's ever a special meeting, we are required to post that 24 hours in advance, but special meetings are a special category. These don't come up super often, but we saw some special meetings happen with City Council during COVID, where they had to have some special meetings to talk about some COVID-related business that was coming up, or if they had a meeting outside of their regular time, they schedule a special meeting. Full agenda packet must be mailed if requested with expense paid. So if somebody requests to have a full agenda packet mailed, then we can and will. And no action may occur on items not listed on the agenda. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, a question here. On the agendas being posted, is there a minimum number? I notice we always do it in 3 places. Is there regulations as to the number, the minimum number that you can post them?
That's a really great question. I'm like opening up my Rosenbergs here to get an answer for you. I feel like 3 is the rule a good rule to go by, but I don't know off the top of my head if that's a Brown Act, Rosenberg requirement, or if that's a city best practice. I do know that we need to have it, I don't know if Clotilde or Emily know, if it's, I feel like minimum of 3 places is.
Minimum of 3 places is correct.
Thank you. Got the right answer. And as a practice, we actually post it more than 3 places. And we also have, in the last year, started sending out the agendas, just the agendas for posting in English and Spanish, not just to those 3 places, but also to all mobile home park managers, and ask them to post it in public places.
Thank you.
And the no action may occur on items not listed on the agenda. This is another thing that is a fairly common, slip up that can happen. Sometimes a public comment may come in during, one of the public comment periods. You have 2 of them at the beginning and end of every meeting. And then you would have a public comment period on any actionable items too. So, if somebody comes in and they want to bring something up in that public comment, well, that item is not on the agenda. That means that the public has not had an opportunity to know in advance they're going to be talking about this. So you can't, even though you're all here and you're in a public meeting, you can't talk about that and you can't take any action on that. What you can do is say, this is a concern. Can we put this on a future agenda? And in that case, if there's two or more people who agree, yes, this is an item that we really want to discuss in a future agenda, which requires action. Informational is a little different, but actionable item for the board, then you would request that to be on a future agenda and staff would add it to a future agenda.
One question here. Are there any exceptions to that rule? An emergency, for example, or something to that order?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, not really. The emergency would be a 24-hour special meeting. So if there were something that came up that we're like, we need to get this addressed ASAP, we could say, let's regroup in 2 days and we're going to post, we're going to put together this agenda, we're going to post notice tomorrow, and then we're going to meet the day after. So that would be an emergency situation. But even in an emergency situation, we can't override the Brown Act and make a decision on something right now that wasn't on the agenda.
Got it.
Also, public participation. So I've already talked about comment periods. So we have general audience comment periods. We have specific comment periods on each item. And then consent calendar requires comment periods. So the public comment in California, public participation is very important, and we want to make as many opportunities for people to speak up and share any of their concerns regarding these things. Speaker rules may be established, and this is at the discretion of the board, of the chair specifically. You can have time limits. The city council, as a general rule, uses 3 minutes, and they set this little timer behind me to 3 minutes, so that way people stay on track and we're not here all night long. I have seen times on special occasions where there is a very hot item on the agenda on a city council meeting, and there's a lot of people who want to speak on it, and the mayor says you get 2 minutes, because I want to make sure everyone talks, but also not here all night. So, in the past, we've not necessarily set time limits, mostly because there haven't been items that we're overly concerned about, someone talking on and on for, but that is something the chair could decide to do. There's also reasonable rules of decorum during the public comment period, and no slander or profanity is permitted. Annual activities of the board. We're almost done with my slides, and then Emily will give you the hot off the presses stuff. So we determined the annual increase to controlled rent spaces, set the budget and registration fee. The budget will be next month. So in May, we're going to be regrouping here to set the budget for fiscal year 25-26. I can't even believe I'm saying 26, which will start July 1st of this year. Other activities that come up as needed, we amend the bylaws when needed, amend the rules and regulations when needed. And then, of course, when an appeal is filed, you hear the appeals of the hearing examiner's petition decisions. So before I hand it over to Emily to talk about some of the stuff that's going on right now, any questions on any of that material? Wonderful. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Emily.
Through the chair, I need to make a correction for the record. So the Sunshine Law specifically states that the government in the Sunshine Act does not mandate a specific number of places for posting the meeting, but it does require that meetings of federal agencies have to be posted at a minimum of 3 places.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clotilde. Thanks, Jenna. All right, so next up, we're going to talk about some recent board activities. Over the past year, and this is really an activity that staff has been carrying out on behalf of the board, we've been transitioning the annual re-registration or reporting of mobile home park owners to an online system. And the reason for this is that it better allows us to track the rent increases and ensure that they are in line with the mobile home park ordinance, and to ensure the compliance of park owners with that ordinance. In the past, the re-registration happened on paper, which was a challenge to track all of those rent increases and ensure that they were in fact in line with the ordinance. So over the past year, we've been transitioning everyone, all the mobile home park owners, to this online system called City Data Services, or CDS. We did a technical assistance session with them in January, and moving forward, all reporting will be entered into the CDS system. So we wanted to give you just kind of a little tour.
It's not switching.
Hold, please.
It works for 23 slides and then stops. Not sure. Okay, yeah, it's just not going anymore. All right, let me see if I can escape. Oh, it's frozen. It's frozen. So yeah, the issue, I'm hitting escape and it's not letting me escape. Let me see if I move over here. Okay, so it's letting me do this. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna put the back end on here. And let me shrink the notes. And we're gonna just move this right over. It's not as slick as the other option, but it'll do. So we'll just do this. And then we'll just click down.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. So we wanted to give you a bit of an overview of what this online system looks like. This is what we see when we log into the system. This is our dashboard with all of the mobile home parks. And I'm going to take you through just a test account here. So no actual data is entered in here. So all of these elements here are what the mobile home park owners are responsible for entering every year as part of the re-registration process. And all of these data elements come from the rules and regulations. So we have the total number of spaces at the top there, CIPT pass-throughs, other pass-throughs, et cetera. We have information on collecting utilities in that section there. And then we have an overview of the park information at the bottom there. And we also, we have them upload their rent rolls every year. So the information that they were entering in the slides that I just showed you is what we use to compare to those rent rolls as another means to ensure that the rent increases are in line with the mobile home park ordinance.
If I can add just one thing on this slide. So the stuff above would apply to the entire mobile home park. You know, do they charge utilities? Yes or no? You know, what amenities are included? This one here applies. So, you know, although there's only one space because it's a test account, all of your parks, anyone who lives in a mobile home park, there would be 100, 200, 300 listed on here. So you've got a line for every single space that's in that park, and they're reporting out information about that space. Is it on rent control? Is it a long-term lease? Is it an exempt unit? There's all these different pieces that we're required to track and maintain. And so there would be a bunch of lines in here that we're checking.
Great, thank you, Jenna. So moving on, this is me and Brenda Gamma, who's part of the Development Services team. And we have been dedicating, gosh, about like 4 hours a week or so to the RAB Electronic Records project. Thank you for that. Thank you. I appreciate that reaction. Thank you. So I think many of you have heard about this project before, but this is a process by which we're going through all of the RAB records since 1987, since the board was created. It's about 20 boxes of documents. We're going through inventorying them, organizing them, and preparing them for upload into our cloud-based document management system called Laserfiche. It's quite a task. You know, some of the files are very well organized, and some from, you know, the mid-90s, and certain years you can tell, like, oh, there was staff turnover here. Like, some are a bit out of order. So it is a bit of a process. It will, I think, continue into the following fiscal year, but now that we have a fully fleshed out admin team and me dedicated to the project, we will continue committing time to it and get it done. So I think, oh yes, and lastly, just a general update. We included, it should be underneath your agenda packets, information about logging into your city email systems. So the reason for this, the city clerk is transitioning all city officials, council members, board members, commissioners to using city emails. And the reason for this is because mainly we want to protect your private emails, phones, communications, from being, you know, publicly disclosed. All emails that you send or texts that you send to city staff are subject to the Public Records Act. So they could be, you know, if someone submits a request, they could be released to the public. So we don't want to release any personal emails or phone numbers or anything like that through that process. So that's the reasoning behind this transition. Jenna and myself are here to support you with whatever you need to access your city emails. We can set up one-on-one sessions if you have any challenges with logging in. I will be emailing everyone your username and password, unless you already have it. Okay, yeah, I will email everyone the username and password. You can access your email through that link, which I will also email out. It's the web browser version of Outlook, or you can download the Microsoft Outlook app on your phone if you want to access your work email or your RAB email from your phone. The instructions that are just beneath your agenda packet have instructions for logging in through the web browser and through an iPhone. We don't have instructions for Android phones, but the steps are pretty much similar. And again, I can help you. I can help you with that. So with that, I think we'll move on to Rohnert. Oh, yes, thank you.
Oh, Emily?
Yes, please.
A question before, long time ago, when we were given an RP City email address. It was through, if I'm not mistaken, something called Exchange.
Yes, yeah, that'll be the same, Outlook Exchange. It's the same thing.
Okay. Is that the one where you still have to change your password every 90 days? Or something like that?
That I don't know. I will check.
Thank you.
It's the same email address that we use, though, and I don't change my password every 90 days, and I don't think I don't know, Clotilde, do you? Maybe you're on top, well, okay, Clotilde does it as a matter of good practice. I
I'm
do not.
required.
Yeah, but yeah, so I don't think that that is a requirement, but yeah, appreciate Emily looking into that.
I'm sorry, it might be because I've had to go to Mike, our IT person, because I didn't remember what my old password was to log on to put in my new one. And Mike and I became best friends for a while there.
That happens with Mike and all of our IT departments. Yes.
So, and God love him, you know?
Mike, I do feel like since you're in the room, we can ask you this
Yeah.
question. Do people have to change their passwords every 90 days? Because I don't.
I already ambushed him.
So,
Okay, policy.
But
So it's
now,
every 90 days?
question now, Jenna says she doesn't do that. And if I'm remembering the old system, it made you do it. I mean, you keep getting reminders and over and over and over. And then it came to a point a couple of times where you couldn't get on until you changed your passwords. That's when I always called you, Mike. So,
We will have to check your account. I mean, if you don't remember your password, then you can just, call that help desk, or maybe Clotilde can open a ticket.
okay, thank you, Mike.
I'll be more than happy to assist you with that. If anyone
thank
has
you,
any problems, you
Clotilde.
can always contact me.
I was gonna have to bring him candy soon if I didn't get it together.
oh man, we owe them so much candy. But yeah, I'll send out an email after this. If it is just as simple as sending everyone username and passwords, we'll do that. If not, then I'll include the number to IT or Clotilde. I'll copy Clotilde, and then we can move forward that way.
Thank you, Emily.
Okay.
Would we be able to reset our passwords if we needed to?
Yes, you should be able to. Mm-hmm. Yep. In a secure place, of course, yes. So I think lastly, we don't have a slide for this, but some of you may have gotten an email from our city clerk's office about a Brown Act training. Okay. So I think this will be, they are going to make it an official meeting with quorum, so some people will be here in person. If you're not able to make it in person, you can view the meeting remotely or view the recording after the fact. I believe she was asking for availability to respond to the doodle poll she included by April 18th. So if you could go ahead and let her know your availability by then, that would be wonderful. And this is a required training for all board and city board and commission members.
If I'm not mistaken, didn't we do all that online before? We did it at home?
So yeah, there's a few trainings, and I was just talking with Commissioner Raymond right before the meeting about this. So there's an ethics training, which is an interactive sort of one where you watch some videos and read some stuff and answer some questions. And I think that's an annual requirement by state law. The Brown Act training is a different training. It's a little bit more engaging, just my personal opinion, because, especially if you get to participate in person, because it's given live, city attorney talks through stuff. There's also sometimes some good examples that come up, so you can kind of get a sense of how to avoid some potential pitfalls of Brown Act. But yeah, so it is a different training. And then, of course, there's also the Form 700, which is another thing that comes, all of it tends to come around the same time of year, right? And in addition to all the commissioners, board commissioners and city council members, any city staff that are staff liaison, which would include, the three of us, are also required to do all those same trainings.
If I'm remembering correctly, the ethics training, you have to spend 2 hours.
We were also just talking about that, yes.
Yes, you can't do it in an hour and 45 minutes. It
They
has to
tack on
be
another
2
half hour.
hours.
They tack on another half hour if you,
And it monitors, it just knows if you're stalling. I don't know how it does that. But it knows if you're trying to drag it out to make it that 2 hours. And what they do is they tack on more if you finish too fast.
I think it is that they give you a maximum.
They do.
Maximum of 7 minutes on each page. And if you go over that, then you get nailed.
Oh, man, okay.
And they figured out all the strategies, huh?
I know. It's like, I didn't even go to the facilities. I was like, okay, wait.
Gotta finish it right here, right now.
So that concludes our presentation. Are there any questions?
Okay, are there any more items from the board? Any items from the staff?
I think we gave you all of our items.
Yeah, you did. You kind of covered it all. We have a second public comment period for items not on the agenda, if anyone would like to speak. Our next regularly scheduled meeting will be Monday, May 1st, here at 6 o'clock. If there's nothing else,
Apologies through the chair, to the chair. It's a Thursday, May 1st. May 1st is correct.
what did I say?
Monday.
Oh, maybe, okay, Thursday, May 1st. If there's nothing else, we can adjourn this meeting, and thank you all for coming.